Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and to be a part of Labster's Science Online So Connected Conference 2021. It is indeed a privilege, and I'm very humbled I can share with you some of my research into online science learning in the Caribbean. And I think it's important just to touch on a little bit of the region itself, so that the viewing audience could get a visual of where we are located. The countries of the Caribbean are located between the North American continent. So you have the US to the north of us and the South American continent to the south of us. And we are pretty much bordered by the Caribbean Sea. One very interesting fact is the fact that our countries have produced or our region, I should say, our region has produced 4 Nobel laureates in the form of the gentlemen that you see on the screen: St. John Peirce, Derek Walcott, Sir Arthur Lewis, Sir Vidya Naipaul. And additionally as well, in 2007, the region was very proud when 3 of our scientists, one from Trinidad, one from Barbados, and from Jamaica, Dr. Anthony Chen, Dr. Leonard Nurse, and Dr. John Agard, were part of a team that is called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I mean, climate change is also a hot topic these days. But just to put it into focus is that these 3 scientists were part of the team that received the Nobel Prize in the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007, along with former US Vice President Al Gore. Now, I'm mentioning these things just to emphasize the fact that our region is very rich in human resource, and our next generation of talented young men and women for whom STEM equity in STEM education will be critical. And moving science online was one of the areas and one of the steps in towards that direction of increasing STEM equity. So as we forge on ahead, we would all recognize that COVID-19 came, and it became pretty much for us a science online timeline, if we want to call it that, because COVID-19 for the Caribbean and even possibly for other parts of the world has become the catalyst that has catapulted more interest as well as action in bringing science online. In this presentation, I will describe to you online science learning in the Caribbean prior to COVID, and seek to as well give you the possible future of science learning, online learning in science, through investigations that I did in online chemistry learning. So in terms of the objectives of this little discussion today, I'll be making reference to these 2 separate studies. And of course, I'll be blending these 2 studies in order to come up with a course in which simulations could be infused in online learning in the future, post COVID-19 in the Caribbean. When I examine the literature with regard to online science education and online education as a whole within the Caribbean, I recognize that literature is very limited with regards to these studies. The initial studies focused mainly on students' perceptions of quality for the online learning, as well as there were studies into the predictors of student success online. But one of the key studies that I came across that was relevant to the Caribbean was the fact that there was a researcher by the name of Williams, 2013, who was able to share with us the perspectives of online education at a community college in Jamaica. And of course, she found that there was an overall positive attitude towards the implementation of that type of distance education. So through personal communications as well with my colleagues in different campuses across the Caribbean and the English-speaking territories, I decided to start to examine what really is the state of online chemistry learning. I was able to find out that there was the absence of any fully online chemistry courses, that the blended format for some of these chemistry courses was being used, as well as there was limited use, if any at all, of virtual laboratory activities. So I therefore then um, was drawn to examine why there was this kind of disparity and somewhat non-cohesive approach towards online chemistry learning in the Caribbean. I also turned to establish theories that could have guided me as to what could have what kind of influence is needed, or what has been influencing leaders towards this kind of demonstration of what online learning in chemistry is about. So I was able to look into a particular theory that we describe as the e-leadership theory. And these are some definitions that have been refined over the years, because it's quite a very new area of study in itself. And as you can see, as we have been facilitating and leading in science at the face-to-face level, it's important as well to recognize we need to also lead at in the online environment. And hence the reason, as we see described here, once we are thinking about the connectivity between groups or individuals in different geographical areas, and collaboration taking place mediated by technology, we are therefore applying the e-leadership theory as well as exhibiting e-leadership skills. So I wanted to look at the theory even further, and Owen Chua proposed this model. And as you can see, it incorporates quite a lot of the educational leadership. E-leadership in itself incorporates a lot of the educational leadership styles of servant leadership, situational, transactional, transformational as well. But even more so important, ICT skills are very important for e-leaders. It is dependent on their beliefs, their knowledge of ICT, as well as their attitudes that influence their ICT skills. And we think that, of course, these leaders, these e-leaders, we'll like to call them, they are crucial. And it is crucial that these e-leaders, and of course, educational leaders as a whole, because they are decision makers when it comes to the use of ICT and its related effects, as I say, from the boardroom to the classroom. So in context, online chemistry learning would have been influenced by ICT knowledge, the attitudes, as well as the beliefs. So if we examine those, then we might be able to determine why the state of online chemistry was what it is in that time. So the main research questions that my study looked into was, is there a difference in the attitudes of faculty and administrators towards the introduction of a fully online chemistry course? Is there a difference in the attitudes of faculty and administrators towards the introduction of virtual chemistry laboratory exercises in a fully online chemistry course? And what are the prevalent faculties and administrators' attitudes and perceptions towards the introduction of a fully online chemistry course, as well as in the introduction of virtual laboratory exercises in a fully online chemistry course? So the population for this study was taken from faculty members and administrators from across 4 departments of chemistry in the territories of Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and Jamaica. The institutions were chosen because they offered full-time, face-to-face undergraduate and or graduate courses. I'm sorry, not courses, but undergraduate and graduate degrees in chemistry. And the administrators would have comprised those persons who are responsible for decision making regarding things like curriculum, technology infusion, teaching and learning. And these would essentially be the heads of departments or the chairs of departments of chemistry, and other executive and academic officers of the university, like the deputy or associate chairs, deans, and deputy deans and directors. So the methodology that was used in this study was a mixed method, employing what we describe as a sequential explanatory research design. So ethical approval of this study was obtained by all of the institutional review boards of each of the university, and the study was conducted in May to June of 2019. The population was made up of 54 faculty members and 22 administrators. The instrumentation that was used essentially comprised the Science Teachers Online Instructional Concerns Survey, which was adapted from Ward, a study done by Ward in 2008. And this survey included questions that were grouped into categories of the types of courses taught, the instructional content, laboratory component, and virtual chemistry laboratories. Those were some of the areas that the questions focused on. Additionally, as well, I had asked opinions regarding online teaching and experience with virtual laboratories. So once the data was collected from the quantitative survey, it was analyzed using SPSS, making use of inferential statistics, especially the independent t-test. The qualitative data, once it was obtained, was analyzed with the assistance of Microsoft Excel software and, of course, in vivo transcription. The recordings and, of course, the transcriptions of the interviews of both faculty members and administrators as well were reviewed, and, of course, the themes that emerged were then determined. In terms of the demographics of the population that participated in the study, as can be seen here, we had a sample size of around 30, comprising of 20 faculty members and 5 administrators. Most of them were tenure, they were full-time, holding a PhD degree. They were females and they had at least 10 years experience teaching chemistry, and the age range was around 40 to 49. In terms of the administrators as well as faculty that participated, you can see from the pie chart an almost even spread across the 4 universities that participated. The analysis of the quantitative and the qualitative data pointed to the following important findings. Caribbean higher education leaders had a positive attitude towards the effectiveness of the online environment for the teaching of chemistry, with that of faculty being more positive than the administrators. They supported the use of virtual chemistry laboratory exercises in fully online chemistry courses, and they were concerned about the use of face-to-face laboratory experience and the role that virtual laboratories could play, as well as they were concerned about the preparedness of students for online chemistry learning. They had perceived as well there were certain barriers which would have prevented the implementation of online chemistry learning, as well as the implementation of virtual chemistry laboratory exercises, including things like pedagogical, technical, personal, and structural barriers. And finally, most Caribbean leaders had not used or had knowledge of the use of online chemistry laboratories for the delivery of the laboratory component. And that last point is very telling. Then COVID came. And this Eric Johansson surreal photography actually captures the world of science and the world of science teaching and learning being practically shattered, as there was no means to facilitate any face-to-face interactions at the time. Or more importantly, there was no facilitation of face-to-face laboratories, though it was because of the emergency. We just had to resort to teaching online using, again, technology to fulfill that need. So again, because of the multiple lockdowns in different territories across the Caribbean, we had to resort to other alternatives. And while Caribbean higher education leaders were largely unfamiliar with, um, let's say, experience with um, virtual chemistry laboratories, in particular, resilience demanded that there had to be some kind of measure of laboratory experience that had to be provided. So therefore, we entered the widespread use of simulations and virtual laboratory software during this pandemic period. This became the turning point. COVID-19 became the turning point in this continuum of online science teaching and learning, and especially in the Caribbean on account of the emergency remote teaching and learning that had to take place. So now this brings us to the second study, wherein, of course, international studies have looked at virtual laboratories, but in the Caribbean, there, of course, is very limited views of even Caribbean undergraduates towards the use of virtual science laboratories and similar advances in the teaching of science. So it's important to remember that students' perceptions are important because they help to shape and direct the future infusion of technology within higher education. So the aim of this study was to describe the perspectives of undergraduate science students from the Caribbean University on the use of virtual science laboratory simulations. I also set about with my colleague, Dr. Lydia Campbell George, to determine if any significant statistical relationship exists between the two major categories of undergraduate science students, mainly the biology and nursing majors, whether their views regarding the use of virtual science simulations. So let me just read that again one more time. So we were trying to determine if any statistical relationship exists between the two major categories of undergraduate science students, the biology and the nursing majors, their views regarding the use of virtual science simulations. We followed pretty much a quantitative retrospective cross-sectional study. The students would have been exposed to the use of a virtual software using Labster in particular over the academic year 2020 to 2021. The opinions were gathered using a survey that was supplied by Labster, but and administered using online student management system. And the data was gathered during the last week of the second semester of the academic year. Descriptive as well as inferential statistics were used to analyze this secondary data. Interestingly as well, there were 11 items on the survey. 2 of them dealt with the demographics in terms of the majors that students were following. 8 were on the Likert scale, asking a range of opinions on simulations. And of course, one of the items was a free response item. So the things that we were looking into were whether the knowledge gain, the motivation, the confidence in lab skills, their general satisfaction with simulations, and of course, a comparison of the benefits that they felt when compared to hands-on, and of course, whether they had a preference for the use of online simulations during the pandemic. We're also able to calculate the Cronbach alpha for the instrument at 0.894. So the majority of students that participated in this survey were the nursing students and the biology students, or the biology majors, with a very small amount coming from the family and consumer sciences group. In item 11, that free response item, we were able to determine themes, and the themes that emerged were effectiveness, technical challenges, and the preference for hands-on, as well as motivation. And I've copied here for you some of the quotes which highlight these themes that we found within that free response item, and this as well gives you some idea of the feedback, direct feedback that students were giving via the survey. In terms of the summary findings, we found that there was favorable acceptance of the use of science simulations among the undergraduate students during that academic year. And this actually coincides with other studies that have actually shown it had positive impact on student performance and academic achievements, as listed here in these studies that we found. In our study, we found that the biology majors showed a more favorable view to simulations than the nursing majors, especially when it came to the knowledge gain, the motivation, the general satisfaction, and the applicability of simulations to the real world. Both of the biology and nursing majors had similar views when it came to their confidence in the use of lab skills after using the simulations, their preference for simulations during the pandemic, and the benefits of simulations over hands-on laboratories. And so we come to, where do we go from here in terms of creating STEM equity post COVID-19 in the Caribbean? There must be some more comparative studies as to perceptions of undergraduate students who have done and used similar type of software. Additionally, there's a need to conduct studies to examine now what are the current views of faculty and administrators in the use of science simulations during the pandemic period. And of course, this actually provides another very good opportunity to compare what was happening prior to COVID-19 and what they've experienced right now. It is clear that leadership and leadership skills need to be part of the training of Caribbean faculty and administrators going forward. There is a need as well to remove the pedagogical, the technological barriers associated with the implementation of online science courses and laboratories. Clearly, when we speak of these barriers, we're referring to, in terms of the technological infrastructure, meaning, of course, bandwidth, increasing the bandwidth, and as well as the use of more infusion of technology as a whole. And of course, these barriers can only be achieved through more direct as well as methodological and direct ways of examining these barriers to ensure that faculty as well as administrators and students are more in tune with the devices as well as internet access, so that you can actually move science online and create more STEM equity. Finally, I would want to add that in the post-COVID-19 science laboratory, simulations should be incorporated within laboratory components of science courses, and ultimately we shall see and should see the development of science blended degree programs as offerings among Caribbean universities. I also want to share, coming down to the end now, just a model that I've working on in terms of simulations that can be incorporated within a blended chemistry program. And this is just to exemplify how we can start with the year ones or year ones or those that come in at level 1, where it is that we're looking at manipulation and immersion, meaning, of course, a lot of hands-on experience with basic equipment and instruments in the lab with very limited use of simulations. Because the idea here is that we are building competence so that we can get students to the point where they can become very versed in the use of advanced simulations, as well as enjoy some experience of a laboratory. As you would note, in the middle, of course, is where more of the work comes in, especially when it comes to the use of analytical and spectroscopic instrumentation, because there's where it may not be absolutely necessary to have students use these equipment on their own, because of course these are very expensive, and therefore we can incorporate some sort of supervision together with um, the use of simulations that are based on these types of instrumentation. And then eventually now, as the competence is built, we can move them up to the level where they can perform general or topic-based projects, which can incorporate both laboratory experience as well as advanced simulations. So this is what I would suggest could be used as a model in fine-tuning. Of course, this is a suggested model as well. So this is what I would like to just show you again, some of my references that was used in these studies. And I thank you for your time and attention.